Well, hello everyone, and Bryce, good to see you.
Everyone and Bryce.
Everyone and Bryce, because he's the first one. Like we didn't even start, and he's already just like boom. He's already said something up in the corner. Anyways, you can't see it, but anyways, hello everybody. Today we're going to be talking about how to be a Christian, and we're going to be looking at this from an interesting perspective about like different things of like, is it okay to have doubts and still be a Christian? Like how do you build the Christian faith even? Like what does that even look like? We're going to jump into these questions. So let's get started. Welcome back to thoughtraid, a show where we take on thoughts and find better ways of thinking about them. I'm Brandon, this is Tim, and today we're talking about what it means to be a Christian. And let me see, wonder what the future will hold between thoughtraid and me. Maybe we can get a cardboard cutout in the background. Maybe. But today we're going to be talking about what it means to be a Christian. And this is going to be interesting because one of the things that I really want to focus on in this particular, segment, whatever, talking about what it means to be a Christian or how to be a Christian, is can you have doubts and be a Christian? Because one of the main themes that we've been going over for the past couple of main thought raids has been like deconstructions of faith. Like, for instance, the last stream we did was we went over Rhett and Link's spiritual deconstruction, and we talked about our thoughts on that matter. And I feel like that's something that has not been as explored as many other ways of what it means to be a Christian. I'm sure you can probably find with an easy search, like, okay, how do I pray? How do you, what can you be this and be a Christian? And these are questions that we will definitely go over if you ask them. Like if there's particular questions that you have about how to be a Christian, let us know in the chat, or if this is something you're watching after we've been live, let us know in the comments and we'll get to them as soon as we can. But one of the most important ones is, can you have doubts and be a Christian? Because I feel like, especially over the past 20 years, at least for as long as I've been alive, that I can remember, having doubts and being a Christian is not always something that was highly looked upon. And I feel like there has been some isolation that has happened from people that may not have it all together when it comes to the faith. They may have doubts in certain areas. And I just, that hits me. Like, I feel like we need to allow people to have their questions and have safe places for people to bring up their questions without fear of immediately being axed from the Christian church or something like that, or to think that you can't go to God and have questions. Because if we truly believe that there is a omnipresent, omniscient God in existence, then you have to understand that he already knows that you have doubts, and he's willing to work with you, because if he's omniscient, omnipresent, that means he created you knowing that you're going to have doubts and still created you anyways. So it is safe to have doubts, but we're going to go into that a little bit. This is something that's been on your mind, so I want to let you loose and let you bring this one out more.
Well, the idea came to me to talk about this because, as Brandon said, on Monday, we reviewed Rhett and Link's spiritual deconstructions, where they talk about how they're reconciling what is not, what they believe, what they don't believe, and what they just find difficult to believe. And I see a lot of people jump into the Christian faith. And we had some friends come down from the north recently. And it seems like, I guess, to a large degree, the way people in the north view religion and the way people in the south view religion is really different. Down here, people are like, most everybody's a Christian, or at least identifies as a Christian.
Weirdly enough, not the people that I've known more recently, yes, but not when I first came to North Carolina.
Well, like when you come down here, and we were just talking about it, because up north, it's like if you take off on a Sunday, and it's like, I have Sundays off for church. Everybody's like, what? You go to church? And then down here, it's like, oh, well, what do you mean you don't take Sunday off for church? Everybody goes to church here. Even the people that are just like being taken to church by their moms or whatever, everybody goes to church for the most part. And so through like the difference between construction and deconstruction, I guess that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today, because a lot of people that are in the faith are more so in the religion. They're more so in the culture than actually engaging in a relationship with Jesus. And there's so many people I know that have grown up Christian and in Christian households, but didn't, I almost said learn, but didn't start following Jesus until 18, 19, 22, 25, 23, 30.
I'm knowing an increasingly amount of people who are later in the years coming to Christ nowadays than when I was younger, where it seemed to be younger in the years. And people were, I remember being in high school and hearing the statistic that statistically speaking, if someone didn't accept Christ before 18, there was a low chance they would after that point. Mm-hmm. At that time. And that was like a big scary thing in the church of like, if I didn't become saved by the time of 18, I'm gone.
Which is such a stupid perspective, because it's like, why would the church be the church? I want to highlight that for a second. Why would the church be afraid of people not getting saved? What are they losing? I mean, it's sad if somebody exists in an unhealthy place. I'll just say it that way, because there are all sorts of things on the scale that are black, white, and gray,
Yeah, I don't think, and even then, to be fair, in my church, it wasn't a matter of like, what are we losing type of deal. It was a matter of what are they losing, by not knowing about Christ and stuff, and recognizing that after age 18, people tend to become more and more solidified in their beliefs and are less likely to think about anything else.
Well, yeah, but like I've seen a lot of religious entities, especially more so Christian religious entities, I guess, because that's the concentration of religious entities here is, that's predominantly
very high.
Christian. But I've seen a lot of engagement in, oh, well, you're not a Christian, let me try and convince you. And a lot of times it's not convince people for their welfare. It's because, well, I'm not really sure what I think. I built my religion and my faith, which is supposed to be the undercurrent of my life, on shaky ground. And so I got to get all these salvations to kind of qualify my position on things. Yeah. So today's topic is how to be a Christian. And initially we had titled this, if you follow us on Facebook, if you don't follow us on Facebook or on YouTube, whatever. But initially the title was Deconstruction or Construction. So I want to talk about that real quick for a second. So a lot of people that I see these days are going through deconstruction. And what that means is they're taking little pieces of what they believe and they're thinking, okay, well, why do I believe this? Or trying to prove or disprove it, which makes sense. It's like, well, is my relationship working? That's another thing that people try to deconstruct, which is kind of unhealthy. It's really important to identify things, and it's really important to ask questions, like Brandon was saying earlier with doubt. Doubt is absolutely necessary for faith. You can't have faith if you don't have doubt, and anybody that claims to have faith with no doubt is lying. That's just how it is. It requires one another. But when people deconstruct things, they're looking for flaws. They're looking for it. And the reason I highlight relationships is everything I do in my relationship with Jesus, I think, okay, well, how does this translate into my other relationships? Because it always does. It always does, right? And so if I took my friendship with Brandon and I was thinking to myself, okay, well, let me deconstruct this. Let me find the if, then, whys, right? So if this is this, then this must be this. So why am I doing this, right? So, for instance, if Brandon is my friend, then why does he act this way sometimes, and why do I put up with that? With Jesus or Christian faith, right? If I believe that homosexuality is okay, then my religion, if I am going to engage in it, must say that it's okay. So why, if those two don't equal each other, then why am I following this faith, right? And that's that spiritual deconstruction that people are going through. And with relationships, it's like, okay, well, because it doesn't meet my standards or whatever, I don't need this, right? When love and relationships is a two-way street, it's mutual. It's giving up of oneself. It's not being prideful. It's not thinking you have it all figured out, So how to be a Christian, construction or deconstruction? So we've been talking about deconstruction, but construction is what I want to focus on. Because as I mentioned, when you deconstruct something, you pick it apart, trying to find the flaws and the reasons why it shouldn't fit within your worldview. But when you construct something, especially something like a relationship, right? You can't construct a relationship based solely on you. Right? So if I came into my friendship with Brandon and I constructed our friendship based solely within the framework of what I believe to be true, and I'm not considering other things to be true, and I'm not open to being corrected, like right before the stream, Brandon hits me with, "Hey, Tim, there's something I want to confront you about." Right? If I wasn't open to that and I was deconstructing our friendship, I could say, "Well, Brandon, I believe myself to be perfect. I believe myself to be doing everything right because I am submitted by God to the will of God. So who are you to confront me?" So if Brandon is my friend, then why is he then he shouldn't be confronting me. So why am I engaging in this friendship? Mm-hmm. Right. But do you have any thoughts on that real quick?
Well, I think that a good friendship would involve, especially if you're concerned for them, a little bit of confrontation. That's my thoughts on that. But otherwise, though, I mean, I think a lot of us do go into relationships or even Christianity with expectations built upon what we experienced before. Mm-hmm. And so we have seen this is how Christianity interacted with my mom and dad. Therefore, I expect it to go this way. I expect my relationship with Christ to look like this. And considering how the church treated my parents, then I don't want this religion because that's clearly what God's about by proxy, and I don't want to deal with that. Mm-hmm. And I feel like a lot of people, they construct ahead of schedule before they even give God a chance, this preconceived notion of God's stupid, he's non-present, he doesn't exist at all, whatever. And then of course, it's really hard to build any sort of faith, any sort of Christianity, any sort of anything off of that basis. Because you are going into that relationship, because again, it is about a relationship with preconceived notions. Or just bring it back into the practical again of let's say I'm pursuing a relationship with a girl, and I've had multiple breakups in the past, and now going into this relationship, I've seen all these things happen, and I expect the woman to treat me in a specific way, and to I don't know, either reject me if all those other women rejected me or something. And now I am interacting very different with her. And I'll give you a tangible story. This is a fun one. So I'm looking at moving out again. And I got some friends I'm looking to move out with. And both of these friends are younger than I am. But one of them, he's been on our show, David. He looks, if you've seen David in our shows before, he looks like he's, 35, 6, maybe on his way to his 40s almost. Like he's just long beard, balding hair. Like he looks like he's younger than I am. And before I knew that, we were looking at these apartments. We really liked this one apartment, and we immediately put down a $55 deposit on this apartment without doing any sort of thinking about this, more like figuring things out before we continued through with it. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't going to work. Turns out we didn't want to go in that direction, and we lost $55 essentially. And I felt so bad because I thought in that moment I'm older than Eric, younger than David, mm-hmm. So I should have been, because Eric and I were the primary ones looking at this apartment, like I should have been the one leading Eric, and I should have been more mature about this whole thing. So I approached David after that point, like, "Oh, David, I'm so sorry. I should have thought about these things." And I was practically treating him like the old wise one, like I should have known these things. But it just so turns out that he was not older than me. He was younger than I was.
Mm-hmm.
And then, boy, did that change how I viewed him to a degree, because I was like, I had this expectation that he was older than me, and so therefore I needed to approach in a certain way, and that was not the case. He was younger than I am. So it's just like, we do that. We do that often. We go into relationships or Christianity, for instance, with these preconceived notions that we've constructed over the years of how God's supposed to be and how we're supposed to interact with him, and then now we're trying to get to God with all of these different things. Some may be good, some may be terrible, but we have these preconceived ideas moving into things.
Well, and that's a really good point. Just thinking about expectation, because there have been so many restaurants where on the outside, let me think about one, CC's Pizza.
Yeah.
So CC's Pizza, shameless plug, great. Well, the food is okay, but it's all you can eat pizza essentially.
It's I was gonna say
like
free pizza.
$7.
It's not $7 for unlimited pizza.
So like on the outside, it's very unassuming. It's very bland. And then you go inside, and once again, it's very bland and unassuming. But they've got like cheeseburger pizza, and they've got like, I mean, there's like 40 different kinds of pizza that they bring out randomly. And to me, that's heaven. You know, it's like, this is great. You know, and we call it feces pizza because of the aftermath.
Feces pizza.
But what I mean, the whole reason I'm saying this is like just the initial expectation you get by the way something seems on the outside, right? Whether it's place to shop like Old Navy or feces pizza, or if it's a relationship with Jesus, you know, we tend to look at other people and we base our experience on them. So going back to the title of today, how to be a Christian, and we're talking about construction, not deconstruction, right? We're talking about how to construct your life as a Christian, which if you're a Christian, what that really means, it's not going to church every Sunday. It's not wearing, you know, dress clothes. It's not standing on street corners handing out tracts to people. That's not what it means to be a Christian at all, right? But you watch any Christmas Hallmark movie and you see people going to church every Christmas, and you know there's a certain cadence to their life. But really, it begins with a relationship, a bona fide personal relationship, and it goes outward from there. You know, when I was younger, I thought, okay, well, how do you be a Christian? You know, and the model that was set for me was you go to this place that you don't really like. You sit in these pews that are very uncomfortable, wearing clothes that you don't normally wear for God knows what reason, because who are you trying to impress? The people around you, shocker. You give money, tithe money. And as a kid, like, man, giving up $5 or something, especially in a roll of pennies, it's like, wow, I could have used this. You know, I didn't understand that. It's just a principle like, oh, you're supposed to tithe, right? And so I'm going to this place that I don't want to be. It's uncomfortable, dressed uncomfortable, giving up money I didn't understand why. And then I'm supposed to say the sinner's prayer, which, wait, I'm a sinner? I'm a kid. You know, I'm 10 years old, man. I don't really know what sin is. I'm just trying to live, you know? But there's all this expectation thrown on me because, well, that's what the culture is like. How do you be a Christian? You follow these rules.
Yeah, and it's very important to state that doing certain things like going to church and tithing, it's not that we're not here to say that these are bad things. What we're trying to say is this is not where the faith starts. This is not where Christianity begins. Christianity begins with relationship with Christ. It begins with communion. You got to begin with and I also believe, because of the scriptures, that it also begins with the recognition of our inability to live well apart from a Savior too. Because I think a major stumbling block, a pitfall, whatever word you want to use for it, or description for humanity, is this notion to think that we're perfect. And while not everyone falls into that pit, there are people that do. I know there are people that believe that humanity is perfect and that the problem is select people are the problem. And
it's always somebody that's not you.
It's always someone who's not you.
It's not me. It's all these people.
All these other
Look at this
people.
Idiot on social media. Look what he said.
Yeah.
Look at these people that are supporting them.
Right, exactly. And slowly but surely we don't realize we're a part of the problem. And that was I want to do a plug for an earlier thought review that we did about I think I called it destroying your faith in humanity. Like we talked about this early on. Like humanity is definitely flawed. They may not do murder. They may not steal. Like all of us may not murder and steal, but like all of us have some degree of selfishness. Of I'd rather preserve myself, do only what I want to do, and never in a day think about someone else and about that person on the street or that person who smells, or I never think about like a positive thought about a person with a lot of money in their wallet. They're just immediately bad. Not even thinking about like what's their background or anything. They're just bad.
Well,
like we have this natural inclination to hate people, even if it's just to the smallest degree.
Well, I don't think it's as much hate as, okay, well, my zone is comfortable. I've got my own problems, and anybody that tries to elevate their problems over mine and make me care about that, it's like, don't you see I got a toothache over here? I mean, sure, your life is on fire, but I got a toothache, man. Like, why are you care about me? Like, and that's the thing. There's so much looking at deconstruction. There's a lot of navel gazing, there's a lot of other people gazing, a lot of comparison. And a few of the people that I know who have recently deconstructed have taken their relationship with Jesus, or perceived relationship with Jesus. I won't even say relationship with Jesus, their relationship with religion, and said, my result does not look like your result because I have these issues in my life. And since I've got these issues in my life, and Christian culture says that this, and this is unacceptable, whereas this, and this is, talking about sin. Like there are many sins that, we're all guilty of, but there are a few that, unfortunately, some of us are blessed with, like different propensities and proclivities and whatever. It's just something that we deal with.
Yeah.
I'm not a kleptomaniac. I don't have issues with stealing. I don't have issues with anger, really, but I do have issues with laziness sometimes. Sometimes I have issues with pride. I'm not a very judgmental person, but Brandon does. I mean, he is judgmental. He deals with that a lot more than I do.
Wow.
But that's the thing that I'm saying. People deconstruct their faith because the system and if you go back and listen to our podcast from Monday, one thing that he isolated was the words belief system, right? Because you can have a belief, but when you add the word system to it, basically there's a certain level of expectation and what's the word I'm looking for? Or where they expect you to do certain things. There's a certain level of expectation in order for you to qualify to be a part of that system or maintain your position or success in that position.
Kind of sounds like a club, but I can't think of the word of what you're talking about.
Yeah, but so let's rewind a little bit. How to be a Christian, right? What exactly does it mean to be a Christian? In its most simplified term or sense is drop your nets and follow me.
Yeah, and that's a big thing because a lot of us pick up over our lifetime these things that we think are really good for us. Like maybe we want power. Like we've lived and grown up in a family that completely and constantly made us feel less than. And now we feel like power and authority is someone that's going to fill that void and make us, we've arrived. Like I now control this, and this. These people look up to me. I've arrived. Or maybe someone once...
Oh, these people like me because I'm on stage?
On stage.
Oh, they asked me to speak. That's a good one. They asked me to speak on this. And
now I'm important. I've been validated by the people, and therefore I've arrived.
Or they've highlighted this one thing that I did well, so that becomes my identity.
Here's my magnum opus, my beautiful work of art, my whatever this thing that I've done, and this is what I've been looking for. And so every one of us has something that we think is like, ooh, this is what's going to fulfill me. This is what it means to be a good person. This is whatever. And Christ says it doesn't matter. The power doesn't matter. The fame doesn't matter. The stuff doesn't matter. That friendship you thought was really important doesn't matter. All of that matters nothing in comparison to Christ pick up your cross and follow me.
I'm thinking about that one scripture that says that something about you've received your reward on earth instead of in heaven.
Oh, yes. That was talking about, there was a time where the Pharisees liked to just go around and be showy, like big gowns, and they would go into the public square and fast, and they would make a whole thing out of it and moan and complain and whatever, so that people knew that they were fasting, and Jesus was like, well, they've already received the reward that they're going to have.
And I'm just thinking about that. Like if we're supposed to love people and we're supposed to sacrifice and serve, but we're supposed to do it in secret because there's also a scripture that says, don't let your left hand know what your right hand's doing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, okay, so what if the Christian faith is just this thing to control me into following a certain set of parameters, right? What do they get by me not saying, okay, I've done this thing? Well, like elevating me to this place of, oh, man, look at all the works I've done. What if I do it in secret and nobody knows about it, right? Are they just trying to get a whole group of people to conform to, being loving?
No, think of it this way. See, the cool thing about some of these things we don't really see until you start following Christ is, so what are they trying to get out of me if I don't let people know that I'm giving or whatever? Like, oh, here I am. Well, we have examples in our culture of rich people that all of a sudden they have all those thousands of relatives they never knew they had show up as they have become rich and famous and stuff of that nature. And they can't get away from these relatives that want all their money to give. And that's a byproduct of like people, they end up getting into all this rich and they want to give it away because, I think in at least American culture, like there is a well-established like generosity pulse. Like to my research, Americans are still more generous than most other countries. Like people in other countries, we are the most generous of other countries. So there's a well-established like expectation of give your money away. But which is ironic because we keep talking about how the rich need to give more. But anyways, I'm not here to get political. Sorry. Focusing. Anyways. But the problem with that, it's like, okay, now I'm rich, now I'm giving money, and I'm letting people know that I'm here. Look at this thing that I'm doing. If you broadcast everything you do, you have the moment of, oh, I feel good because look at people see that I'm being generous and they're going to think higher of me. But then you're creating problems for yourself. Now you're setting yourself out as a target of people that are going to use you. And on top of that, there's just other things that can happen that just will make that sour and make you become jaded real quick.
Well, beyond that, though, like I get where you're going with that, but my whole process was like, okay, so there's this Jesus person, so let's do all these things. And Jesus did this himself. He would heal people and say, hey, don't tell anybody this.
Yeah.
He would say, hey, I just, healed the guy's eyes.
Yeah.
And then he said, don't tell anybody. What'd the guy do? He went and told people, obviously. But, having this sincere one-on-one conversation, this sincere lifestyle of being vulnerable and open with Jesus, and not telling anybody about it, not specifically not including anybody in that space that is set aside just for Jesus, right? Once again, the title is how to be a Christian, right? Is it as showy as we think it is? Are we supposed to be on stage and worshiping? Are we supposed to serve at our church? Like, what does it actually look like? But if you look at Jesus's life, like if you do anything, just go through the Bible and look for the words in red. See what Jesus spoke, right?
It's a good place to start.
Yeah. Because a lot of people get hung up on the Bible. And I want to be very careful saying that. I'm not invalidating the Bible, but I want to say that people get hung up on the Bible and they miss Jesus completely. They're like, well, what about this? What about this? What about this?
To be able to understand the Bible, the Old Testament and New, you have to start with Jesus, who is the key to unlock to understand the rest of the Bible and the proper context for everything.
Yeah, so my relationship with Ariane, my wife, let me use that for a second. So and I'm using this as a metaphor or simile or whatever to my relationship with Jesus and the Christian faith. So with Ariane, I'm married into her family. I have a mother-in-law, I have a father-in-law, I have a brother-in-law, I have a sister-in-law, and then there's extended family there, plus her friend group, which has now become my friend group. If early on I had just taken Ariane out of the equation, I would have these people that I'm kind of connected with, but the whole reason I'm connected to them is no longer present. It's just kind of awkward. And then it's like, well, how do I connect to these people, right? What is that connection point that I'm searching for, right? And so when you see people engage in a Christian relationship and they don't have Jesus, but they're trying to relate to other Christians, it's like, okay, well, I don't have the primary thing, so what do? I serve in the church. I put on Facebook, my social status is Christian. I guess Christians go downtown and feed the homeless. I don't really know why. I just know it's what I go through the motions, right? So with her friend group, they're a little bit more sarcastic than I was used to and silly. They go to church and they go to cookouts and they do all that stuff, right? What if I just did that without the relationship with my wife? You know, it's like, why are you here, really? You know, I don't. What if I laughed at all the inside jokes that we have without having a reason to laugh at them? What if I was not there? What if I was not present when the inside joke was created, but I laughed anyways? And that's honestly what the whole deconstruction movement is about. It's like, well, why am I doing this?
Yeah, a lot of people just been following Christ, but just doing it because they're living off the coattails of their parents' faith, and so they'd have no actual established relationship with Christ whatsoever, except that their Facebook thing says Christian. And that's a good, I like the way you're putting this, Tim, because it's like you're right. Like it's like being involved with the wife's family without actually being married to her, and it's just like, what are you doing? Like you're missing so much context without having her there.
So somebody asked me the other day, if somebody was faking it as a Christian, would I prefer them just walking away from the faith completely and trusting them with God if God exists, or would I try and coerce them back into the faith? And honestly, I would just let them go.
Yeah.
And here's why. You know, if I believe that God is who he says he is, if I believe that the Holy Spirit was given to us for the purpose it was given to us, and if I believe that Jesus truly died for the reason why he died, and actually, you know, was not reincarnated, but rose from the dead and sacrificed himself. If I really believe all that stuff, then I have to believe also that, well, God is God. You know, God is capable of saving. There's no third or fourth or fifth or whatever book of Timothy. The Bible's not about me. The Bible talks about how God wanted just to have a relationship with people, and people said, no, we don't want a relationship with you, we want a relationship with man. And so he gave them all these kings in the Old Testament that came close, but they were they had issues with lust, they had issues with being materialistic.
They were all poor representations of Christ. Poor representations. Some better than others. Even the best was still like dirty rags in comparison to how good Jesus truly is.
Yeah, and so here's the thing. You know, all these kings came and they went, and they all had their own individual downfalls. Even David, King David, which was like one of the prized children of God, you know, danced through the streets. You know,
man after God's own heart. Like, that's a huge title.
Yeah, and you know Bathsheba, and it's like, what's up, girl? And you know, cheats and gets her husband killed, all that stuff. Anyway, God's like, man, they're just not getting it. And so God's like, all right, let me go down here and let me suffer with them, more so than a lot of them have, in a way that they're probably not even going to acknowledge.
Yeah. See, being a Christian, and this is important because we are called to be Christ-like Christian. There is a lot, and I'm not going to lie nor sugarcoat this. There is a lot of trials and persecution and suffering of some degree that every Christian goes through because the Bible often talks about we're like in this world, but we're not of this world. The world does not love us because we are not a part of it. Like if we were a part of it, it would love us, but we're not. There's a lot of stuff that kind of goes on about it. Being a Christian, it's not something you just join because, ooh, let me have God bless me. Like, oh, blessings, yes, but no. Like, we're not in it because of what we can get out of it, although that is a part of it.
Well, some people are, especially if you're in Market America. You I'm just kidding. That's part of my story. Like back then, I was
Not every person, but some people, yes.
There's something out there called prosperity gospel. Just be careful of it.
Be careful.
Not everybody in Market America and
follows the prosperity gospel. Yes,
but
correct.
I'm sorry.
But anyways, so like when you join Christ truly, there's gonna be things people are not gonna understand you. People are gonna come against you. People are gonna say mean things about you, and sometimes people are just gonna flat out attack your life. And so, like, looking at this, like, ugh, why would I want to be a Christian even in the first place if that's going to make me, like, be at odds with people that otherwise I'd be friends with? All that you won't really be able to know until you spend the time to understand who Christ is. Because when you know who Christ is, then then the things that Christians do that are weird, that are legitimate but weird, where they are legitimately going to church, where they are legitimately giving their tithes, where they're legitimately helping out the hungry and those out there, all that is because of the relationship they've established with Christ, and they see the things that he went through, and all of their problems become minimized because it's like the reward of which comes from doing that truly and honestly, and especially the relationship that you get with Christ by intentionally seeking him out through reading about him in the Word, praying and talking to him, learning about him through other people. All that method, like all those things build up. He's so worthy of it.
Well, let me jump in here real quick because I was going somewhere with that story.
Okay,
but
sorry.
I like how you developed it. But just going back to the analogy I used of my relationship with Jesus being like my relationship with my wife, right? And now if you take my wife out of the picture, all the friends and all the spheres and stuff that I jumped into, it's like, why am I even here? Right? So if you're in a place, and if you have grown up in a place where you're just part of Christian culture and you're like, why am I here? Right? And you're probably thinking to yourself, I need to figure this out. I need to deconstruct this, right? Or maybe you don't really know who Jesus is, but you've been curious about the Christian faith. Or maybe you've been hurt by the Christian faith, church hurt, or bigots, or people that are just acting the part. Down here in the South, we call them posers.
Really?
I was such a poser in middle school. Like I would wear all the skater shirts and stuff. I didn't skateboard at all. But anyway, I want you to think about that analogy that I used, right? Like, just look. There's a scripture that says that they will know you by the fruits of your life, right? And then ask yourself, okay, well, why? Why am I doing this, right? Why am I wanting to give my money to these people? Not the Christians. I'm talking about the needy. Why am I wanting to engage in self-sacrifice? Why the heck do I take the initiative to do dishes when I hate doing dishes in my household, right? Why do I spend the finances I could spend on myself on buying gifts for my wife? Like, when you actually have a relationship with somebody, you start understanding self-sacrifice. Yeah. If you're a parent, like I'm not a parent, but I had pets before, and there's a lot of self-sacrifice that goes along with pets too. Yeah. Right. And by self-sacrifice, I mean, it's 2 a.m., you're exhausted, you got to work at 6 o'clock the next morning, your puppy, it's like, well, let me figure out what's wrong with this. Like, what do you need? Like, do you need to go out? Do you need, and a lot of times I wouldn't do it with a good heart. Like, I'd be frustrated, like, oh God, I'm so frustrated. But I know that they need that from me. And I don't do it because, well, I have to. I do it because, well, I want them to have a good life. So how to be a Christian? When you look at Christian culture and you see all the things they do or profess to do, or think about the value proposition. I think about that all the time when I see churches that are openly process-oriented or belief system oriented. Look at the fruits of their life, right? Do they walk in peace? Do they have open hands with everything? Does somebody come through the door that might be LGBT, right? And whether you believe that is right or wrong doesn't matter. It's a non-essential. And if you are like, well, that isn't essential, you need to check your spirit. Because nowhere did Jesus say that being homosexual, yes or no, or transgender, he didn't address most of that. But he did mostly address anger. He did mostly address people taking his name and his Father in vain, and doing all sorts of foolishness in the temple, and like dismantling a relationship. That's an essential, right? But if somebody's on the off path and you're thinking, okay, well, I need to course correct this for their sake. Well, no, you don't. You got to understand boundaries, because Jesus doesn't do that for us either. So in my relationship with my wife, once again, if I tried to change her, and I said, hey, in order for this relationship to work, you need to change for my comfort, from my perspective, because of my expectation. It would quickly devolve because there would be certain things about her that she's not going to change because it's like, excuse me? You can't change somebody else. However, when you walk into a place and you love somebody where they're at, whether or not they change, if you engage in a relationship with somebody with an expectation for how things should play out on the other side, that's always going to be a recipe for success. Because if you look at God, if you look at Jesus, and we talked about this earlier this week, when God created man, he put man in the Garden of Eden. All the needs were met. He put 2 trees in the Garden of Eden, knowledge of good and evil, and the tree of life, right? And he said, you can eat of this one, but I wouldn't recommend eating for that one. Don't do it. And he gave us a choice, right? He put us in a place where he was risking losing relationship with us because of what we would choose, right? And if the God of I was thinking about this because all my life, Brandon, all my life, guys, I was in a position where I tried to curate everything. I tried to curate, especially relationships. There were certain people that I aspired to be friends with, and there were certain people I aspired not to be friends with because I didn't think that I liked what I saw on the front end, right? Not even knowing them, just looking at their lifestyle, right, or the way they looked or whatever. And I made judgments because of that, right? And engaging in those relationships, trying to min-max, and min-max is a gaming term. It's where you have the least amount of risk with the greatest reward, right? Min-max. So when I would min-max my relationships, I would say, okay, well, I'm going to give you enough intimacy and commitment until here. And if I don't see you stepping towards me and understanding my value and worth without going through the work of deserving that relationship, I'm going to cut it off. And people do that with Jesus all the time. They say, Jesus, because you're not meeting me where I expect you to meet me, you know what?
We're done.
Everything you've done, everything you stand for, everything that Christian faith, I use air quotes because whatever, says that you are, you know what? You're cut off because you're not meeting my expectations. What if all the relationships that you had in your life were that way too, where people had this set of expectations where it's like, okay, in order, how to be a friend, you have to meet my expectations, right? How to be a Christian, you have to meet Christian expectations. You can't be sinful. You have to do all these certain things.
But I will say this, though. I want to make sure that this because I don't think you're saying this, but I want to make sure that is clear, because boundaries are still important within relationships, because there are certain things that we are precious that need to be protected, that someone needs to understand, because if they don't understand or they choose not to understand it, I can't keep allowing them to be in that space, because by letting them be in that space, they can destroy that precious thing that I'm protecting. So in the case of, like, to say that, like let's just say, you know, you're in a relationship and the person's doing very toxic things, that they're constantly yelling at you and for very small infractions, and it's like you can't necessarily just love them into being a better person, because if they're not willing to see their own flaws, they're going to continue to step on you and to yell at you and to treat you like trash.
Well, you got to be careful there too, because engaging in boundaries and creating distance, because guys, there's a difference between love and trust. You know, that's a big thing between me and Brandon. A big thing that we understand, we action in our relationships. You can love somebody without trusting them. And sometimes disciplining, and this is a big thing too. When God tells me something that I don't necessarily like, or if he says, hey, this is healthy, this is unhealthy, and I don't like that, just like Adam and Eve. It's like, you know, the serpent came and was like, Eve, you need to go eat of this because he's trying to keep knowledge from you. She's like, well, I don't like that. Let me go. God, yeah. In fact, Adam, here you go. And they both engaged in it, you know? If somebody comes into my life and I have all these expectations and I'm like, well, I don't like that. You know, I don't like you yelling at me. There's a difference between saying this is not allowed, get out of my life, or this is not allowed, I'm still going to love you, I'm just not going to trust you in this space, and just being honest with that. Because that's what God did. He didn't say I'm separating you from me forever.
But at the same time, there are some actions and behaviors that are just, I am going to love you, but you're not going to be in proximity to me because you're destructive. and I'm not going to allow you to destroy me.
Right, and that's loving.
Yes, that's what I'm trying to say. I'm not sure that you made that clear, because the way that you're describing could be interpreted as, like, hey, like, I know you're doing a bad thing, but I'm going to love you through it, and then I'm going to allow this to keep happening.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Discipline is loving. Like, for instance, on the subject, I use something less caustic in our culture, such as laziness, right? If God said, hey, you don't work, you don't eat, I mean, that, boom, right there, that's a principle. If you don't put your hand to the soil and you don't create something, you don't eat, right?
Right.
I don't necessarily like that. I wish it would be different, but just because I wish it would be different because it's comfortable and because of what I want doesn't make it true. And that's where you get into truth. That's where you get into, you got to be careful with universalism too, because I'm not saying that everybody's truth is right.
Right.
Just because you believe something to be true doesn't mean it's healthy.
Yeah.
And, we, like Brandon was saying at the onset of our podcast today, we all have this tendency to think we're right. And we all have a tendency based on our worldviews because we've lived X amount of years. And up to this point, this is the best inference I can make on this subject.
Yeah.
It's like, well, who are you to tell me this? This is the best thing I've got so far. I must be right, or else I'll be doing different. Like, nobody intentionally says, I'm going to fail. Nobody does that.
Yeah.
Nobody sets out to fail. Everybody sets out to be a success, to whatever. But there's always a little bit of that pride in the mix, which makes it difficult to hear the other person's side.
Yeah, make it pride. Pride can make it hard to hear. But that's the thing. Like, pride is so stupid. It's just confidence in something you're not.
Freaking Bryce. We're never gonna give you up.
Never gonna give you up.
Plot twist. He's Jesus.
Yeah.
That'd be so funny. What if Morgan Freeman was God this whole time?
I don't think he would make a good God. But anyways, like, now I forgot what I was gonna say. Crap.
Let's reset. How to be a Christian.
Yeah, but like, so there are boundaries. There are boundaries to say that God, and that's the thing, and that's what we need to bring out here. Like, there's a difference between love and trust. That applies to God also, because He knows everything from beginning to end. He can love us constantly because He is love. That doesn't mean that, like, just because God loves you, you can do anything you want. Like, it's not a license to do the thing that I know not to do. I'm gonna do it anyways. Like, this is no license to live contrary to that, because, like, there's trust with God as much as there also is love with God, and there is separation from God, like a willful, like, you want nothing to do with me, you constantly want to do your own thing. You know what, like, being in my presence for you would be hell.
Well, also, like I said earlier, I love taking my relationship with Jesus and testing it in my real life relationships. And so if somebody does something to ruin my trust, I'm like, okay, well, you got to stay over on this side. If my boundary's here, you got to stay on this side. And we can still talk and we can engage. Or maybe I even need to put a boundary where we can't talk. Because I got to look at myself first. And it's like, what do I need to fix in this? Am I being prideful? Am I being too haughty? Am I being too whatever? It's God's job to show me that. But it's also my job to ask. Because if I didn't, I could engage and say, okay, well, this person's just being a piece of crap because I'm okay. And my boundaries here. A lot of people look at boundaries and they're like, I just got to put boundaries up and cut all the toxic people out of my life. Well, by saying that, that's essentially saying this person has no value. They're just a toxic person, and who cares about them? And instead, it's, well, I'm still going to love you, but you got to stand over there. And it's having the perspective, because Scripture says that it's up to each man to seek out his own salvation.
With fear and trembling.
And that's a really messy process. But if you went out in the world and you looked at the people at the supermarket that are wearing masks and you think, or if you look at the people at the supermarket that are not wearing masks and you're like, and you make that judgment call, you dehumanize them. But when you realize, okay, this person is trying to seek out their own salvation. They're trying to find out what's healthy for them or not. Everybody's asking themselves that question. Nobody's intentionally saying, I want to die from COVID, for instance. Nobody's intentionally saying, I want to ruin my sex life by engaging in pornography or whatever. Nobody intentionally does that stuff. Or if they knew that it was actually going to be unhealthy, they wouldn't do it, you know?
Well, no one would intentionally go into with that thought process, most likely. I'm sure there are some people that like to self-deprecate and therefore may think that and do that. But in general, they're not thinking about the consequences. They're just thinking about the short term of the enjoyment of the porn, of the enjoyment of the whatever it is, like, I don't know, licking doorknobs because I want to get COVID. Like, not thinking about the COVID part kind of thing, just giving an example about a fast way to probably get COVID.
Yeah. Well, bringing this home because we're running out of time, for my side anyways. Thinking about judgment and thinking about each person working out their own sanctification with God. Right, their own salvation with God, because salvation is basically allowing God to sanctify us, to take us from unhealthy to healthy. That's all that is, right? So if you think back to the garden, the reason that everything happened, it's basically we had it good. We had, we didn't have knowledge of good and evil, but we had life, and then we partook of it. So now it's like we have to weigh the good and the bad since we ate of that tree, right? And the whole process of sanctification is us getting back to a place where we fulfill the role that God intended and that Jesus paid for. And what that requires is a personal relationship, a me and Jesus relationship above all else. It's not me and my wife and then me and God. No, that would be a mess. It's got to be me and God, then me and my wife, then me and everybody else, And the reason I'm saying that, there's a scripture that says, don't call out the speck in your neighbor's eye when you've got a log in your own eye. You've got your own stuff you're worried about. And honestly, your lifetime, like Brandon's bout with pornography, if I can bring this up real quick, there have been seasons where he thought, I'm done. I don't have an issue with it. And then something happens and it comes back in a different way. And then he realizes, God's trying to heal me or correct me in this other area that's in a third dimension related to my issue with pornography. It's a symptom, or I'm sorry, the root, whereas pornography is a symptom. And it's one of those things where it's like, okay. So God's doing something else in me. God's doing something else in me. We're so others focused because we're big projects, guys. We're all big projects. And in our relation, if God is so pure, you got to think to yourself, it's like having that one friend who has no financial issues, who has no health issues, who everybody loves, who is and they don't do it in a prideful way. They do it in a way that's perfectly loving, right? And it's like, how do I aspire to have a relationship with somebody like that? And that in and of itself is a question, right? So how to be a Christian, it's understanding that process of engaging with Father as a prodigal son. And look up that story. Just type in story of the prodigal son if you don't know what I'm talking about. Because that's a big thing for a lot of people. Most people can't even wrap their heads around having a healthy relationship where you don't yell at each other, right? And so engaging in a primary relationship with a perfect father, a perfect leader, a perfect friend, it's inconceivable. And so as you navigate that, you have to do that with humility, because the thing about Jesus is that he's not going to judge you for anything. He's not going to say, well, this and this and this is too much for me. You stay over there. I give up, right? But I wouldn't understand what it's like to have a good relationship with my wife if I did not know Jesus the way that I do, right? And all the areas where I still need to grow, it's impossible if I do it on my own strength. I mean, you can only get so far with your own limited worldview and the people around you, because they got their own stuff going on too. So how do you be a Christian? You honestly realize you're not perfect, realize that's okay, and realize that somebody who is perfect cares enough to love you through that. And then realizing that all of the other relationships in your life, social, romantic, whatever, all of that comes second. Now, I don't mean like they're not as valuable, because people are very valuable, but you're not going to help your relationship with God by healing your relationship with your dad or your brother, your sister, your ex-wife, your girlfriend, your friend. No, it's backwards, right? So if Brandon came in and is like, hey, let's fix this, whatever, the only way we're going to fix it is by understanding what perfect love is, which is who Jesus is. So how do you be a Christian? Honestly, you just realize you're faulty, realize that's okay. Realize that it's not within your job description to change other people, but the same God that is who he says he is, you got to believe that he is who he says he is, and he's going to do that for other people. And when you really grasp that, you live life like this.
I wanna put I hear what you're saying, but I want to put out something that's important, because there's a scripture verse that says, "Be perfect as I am perfect." And so I don't want it to be said that it's okay to be faulty, because I think people have made a religion out of being faulty, and they've made an idol out of faultiness, and then they only live so high because of that. And I think God does want us to set our standards beyond what we're capable of, recognizing that we won't reach it, but knowing that we're going to go so much higher than if we only shot for, well, I'm faulty. And then that's the way it is. Because the minute you begin to camp out there, then your standards drop. Or at the very least, you risk your standards dropping, and you risk the power needed to move forward in personal growth and development. So don't camp out in the, well, I'm just a faulty person, that's always the way it's going to be, because that can and usually does snowball into accepting things you would normally not accept, and then you find yourself at the bottom of the hill, like, how did I get here?
Yeah, well, you're not designed to be a C student anyways.
Right. We're designed in the image of Christ. We're designed to be A+ students. Mm-hmm. We are not just made to be here. We're made to be way up there, seated in heavenly places with Christ, and we're called to live that as if we're already there. So I want to talk about that. That probably be a topic we should have about perfection, proper perfection, not perfectionism that beats you into the ground, but perfectionism that leads you into higher standards, of a standard of excellence, I guess. I think that's usually what companies call it, not perfection, but excellence. Mm-hmm. Because that's important. Like, don't become complacent in thinking that, well, I've arrived and that's just where it is. Because when you do that, then you plateau right there. And oftentimes after plateauing there, you kind of drop off, because...
Well, it's just like a good coach, A good coach isn't going to let you just sit at your old record.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's the thing also. It's not sustainable, because if you stay plateaued too long, you forget why you're there in the first place. You just... It's like God can constantly nourish you in the sense of, like, give you fulfillment, show you more of himself and help you improve if you remain hungry for it. Like, and there is when we plateau, if we don't kindle that hunger, what ends up happening is that nothing can satisfy us. Like, only God is able to, the hunger grows for a bit, and like actual hunger, it cuts off and you cease to feel hungry until the day comes where you're becoming very emaciated, if you will. But again, I'm using physical terms, but what I'm trying to describe is, like, in a spiritual sense, when you just focus on, well, I'm faulty and that's the way it's going to be, you ignore that passion and that drive for continuing growth that needs to be fed for you to continue to personally develop, to become more loving, to become more like Christ, become more sacrificial for others, to become more generous, to become more... the very thing that the world wants, but never wants to put the time in to become. The world wants... A lot of the world wants communism and socialism, but doesn't want to put in the work for it to actually function properly. So instead, it ends up needing capitalism, but then people then don't actually do anything with that, and then they just become greedy, and then you get into this weird cycle. And this is me thinking about a lot of different things. I probably should have a separate thought rate on this. But anyways, reel it in. How to be a Christian.
Allow God to sanctify you. Put that relationship first and base all your other relationships on it.
Yes, and recognize that you're not perfect, and humanity is not perfect. And us and humanity is in need of a new standard, a standard of Christ who is loving, who is joyful, who is patient, who is kind, who is gentle, who is in control of himself. These are all things that get attacked when it comes to what God looks like. Maybe God's slothful. Maybe he just does whatever he wants because like he's a god. So who God is God. So what can stop him? Or that he's not loving because why would he allow this, and this? No, he's the standard of those things, and recognizing our need for a savior and that we're not perfect is where it starts. And being a Christian is figuring that out with Christ, going to that read in the Word, who is Christ, to understand the rest of the Bible as well, and genuinely following him. You're not going to church because you have to. You're not helping the sick and the poor because you have to. You understand Christ first and then begin to develop who he is, and then going out there because you get to, and understanding it from a deeper level as you would understand a wife in comparison to understanding, or a husband and than a friend. Like it's just, or an acquaintance, just getting that relationship in there and taking the time necessary to grow it. I'm done. Okay. I just wanted to cinch that in a specific way. So anyways, I want to thank you guys for watching. If you've not done so already, make sure to like this stream and to comment. What are your thoughts on what it looks like to be a Christian? Do you think you have any good pointers for other people? Do you have questions about what it's like to be a good Christian? What it is to be a Christian? Let us know. We want to know those type of things. And to make sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification, because we'd love for you to be a part of this chat. And if you do not hit that bell notification, you will not know when we go live eventually. YouTube will just stop telling you. So make sure to do that. Follow us on Facebook. But with all that said, I want to thank you. What the heck is happening? Oh no! Well, I guess we're not
messing
doing
with
that.
our cameras. It's okay.
Just
let it go.
We'll end it differently this time. Anyways, make sure we broadcast every week on Mondays, Fridays, and Saturdays at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And tomorrow we'll be playing a little bit of Overwatch. And having some fun with that at 7 p.m. So
Actually, you should get Diablo. It just came out. So good.
Maybe. I don't know. Maybe.
Diablo.
But at the very least, we will be playing games tomorrow, and we'd love to have you there. Specifically on Monday, too, we'll be talking about, is swearing a bad thing? So that's something...
Can you follow Jesus and be a potty mouth?
And be a potty mouth. That's something I'd love to talk about and just kind of look at that from different angles, because that's something that's on my mind a lot, and I'm going to share that with you on this upcoming Monday. So all that said, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you